Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Band Together. My name is Paul Everts. I'd love you to reach me at Band Together, B-A-N-D, the number 2, together at Comcast.net. Also, go to my website and go to the curriculum tab, and you'll see I'm a member of the John Maxwell team. So, therefore, I'm certificated to coach, speak, train. Here's a couple of wonderful topics I can cover. Learning to become a person of influence. And just to go over a couple of things with you, what I'll do is I'll come down. I can do this one-on-one. I can do this with any group, any size. Nurtures people, becoming a person of influence. An influencer nurtures people. The height of your influence upon others depends on the depth of your concern for them. Many leaders love their position more than their people. When that happens, they soon lose their possession. So that was just an example. Also, I have another wonderful resource to go over with you. This is John Maxwell's Winning with People. And if you're interested in that, again, B-A-N-D, the number 2, together at Comcast.net. And then finally, it's true, I do have a book published. It's been out for about 5-6 years. This is Conducting My Life. It's a good book, Life Lessons from a High School Music Teacher. Go check it out on Amazon. I have about 12 in my garage. So I will do it, $14.83. I also have hard copies too. So if you're interested in that, B-A-N-D, the number 2, together. So there's my commercial for today. Let me get these down on the floor. As you know, this is done in my kitchen. I would love to have help. So if you're into marketing, if you're into being somebody's manager, let's talk, man. I'd love to have people come and help me because otherwise it's just me pushing the button and no editing, no nothing. I'm wearing a hat today in honor of our son. Our son is in the Navy, and we are expecting our second grandson. So they leave today. They're stationed in today, actually, just so you know. I'm doing this on Tuesday, the 25th of January, 2022. It's 1:56 p.m. California time, which is Pacific Standard Time. I understand that. And but I think I have this coming out to you on the 8th of February. So by now, Wyatt could be born. That would be pretty cool. But I'm thinking of PJ and Ashley today. That's why I got the hat on. So as you know, we're going through John Maxwell's book, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. It's one of the most important books in my life, and I love to share it. I know John Maxwell, not personally. I met him in Rockland, California, back, I believe, sometime like in August 2002. So it's been 20 years. So we're on chapter 4. If you want the previous 3 chapters, they're available. So the law of navigation. Anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. Now, this touches my heart a little bit because my grandfather is Commander Joseph Ambrose Flynn, who is the executive officer of the USS Indianapolis. He was killed in action on the 30th July 1945. He went down with the ship. I went to their 50th reunion, which is 1995, and I met the ship's doctor, and the ship's doctor comes up to me and says, hey, Paul, would you like to learn how your grandfather died? And I swallowed hard because my mom and my aunt never talked about their father's death. And he assured me, he goes, it's not gruesome. He wasn't eaten by sharks. No. So I'd like to tell you how he died, though. And I said, okay, tell me how my grandfather died. He went to the hull of the ship, Paul, and he commanded the hull of the ship to be closed. And they all closed it. And there were several hundred men down in the bottom of the hull trying to save the ship. And your grandfather was one of them. Oh, brutal. But he was the executive officer, which meant he was part of the team that was the Navigators for the ship USS Indianapolis. So what John Maxwell does in his book is he tells about the story of Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen. Ironically, Amundsen had not originally intended to go to Antarctica. His desire was to be the first man to reach the North Pole. But when he discovered that Robert Peary had beaten him there, Amundsen changed the goal and headed toward the other end of the Earth, north or south. He knew his planning would pay off. And so what happens is Dr. Maxwell goes into this depth of a story and how one person plans and the other person doesn't plan so well. And the person who's not planning so well ends up killing the crew pretty much. I mean, he doesn't. So, for example, Scott violated the law of navigation. The other team of men was led by Robert Falcon Scott. a British naval officer who had previously done some exploring in the Antarctic area. Scott's expedition was the antithesis of Amundsen's. Instead of using dog sleds, Scott decided to use motorized sledges and ponies. Their problems began when the motors of the sledges stopped working only 5 days into the trip. The ponies did not fare well either in those frigid temperatures. When they reached the foot of the Transantarctic mountains, all the poor animals had to be killed. As a result, the team members themselves ended up hauling the 200-pound sledges. It was arduous work. Scott had not even given thought or attention to the team's other equipment. Their clothes were so poorly designed that all the men developed frostbite. One team member required an hour every morning just to get his boots onto his swollen, gangrenous feet. And everyone became snowblind because of the inadequate goggles Scott had supplied. On top of everything else, the team was always low on food and water. That was also due to Scott's poor planning. The depots or depots of supplies Scott established were inadequately stocked, too far apart, and often poorly marked, which made them very difficult to find. Because they were continually low on fuel to melt snow, everyone became dehydrated. Making things even worse was Scott's last-minute decision to take along a fifth man, even though they had prepared enough supplies for only 4 men. Scott covering a grueling 800 miles in 10 weeks, Scott's exhausted group finally arrived at the South Pole on January 17th, 1912. There, they found the Norwegian flag flapping in the wind and a letter from Amundsen. The other well-led team had beaten them to their goal by more than a month. If you don't live by the law of navigation, as bad as their trip to that pole was, that is not the worst part of their story. The trek back was horrific. Scott and his men were starving and suffering from scurvy. But Scott, unable to navigate to the very end, was oblivious to their plight. With time running out and desperately low on food, Scott insisted that they collect 30 pounds of geological specimens to take back, more weight to be carried by the worn-out men. Their progress became slower and slower. One member of the party sank into a stupor and died. Another, Lawrence Oates, was in terrible shape. The former army officer, who had originally been brought along to take care of the ponies, had frostbite so severe that he had trouble going on. Because Lawrence Oates believed he was endangering the team's survival, it is said that he purposely walked out into a blizzard to relieve the group of himself as a liability. Before Oates left the tent and headed out into the storm, he said, "I'm just going outside. I may be some time." Scott and his final 2 team members made it only a little farther north, giving up. The return trip had already taken 2 months, and still they were 150 miles from their base camp. There, they died. We know their story only because they spent their last hours writing in their diaries. Some of Scott's last words were these: "We shall die like gentlemen. I think this will show that the spirit of pluck and power to endure has not passed out of our race." End of quote. Scott had courage, but not leadership. Because he was unable to live by the law of navigation, he and his companions died by it. Followers need leaders able to effectively navigate for them. When they are facing life and death situations, the necessity is painfully obvious. But even when consequences are not as serious, the need is just as great. The truth is that nearly anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. That is the law of navigation. So there's a couple things. Before leaders take the people on a journey, they go through a process in order to give the trip the best chance of being a success. First, navigators draw on past experience. So like for me, when I go to a school, I got done teaching December 22nd, 2021, and I chose to go to all these different schools. And when I choose to go to schools, I take what I learned from the previous school, and it helps me. So I drew on my past experience. Success teaches you about yourself and what you're capable of doing with your particular gifts and talents. Failures show what kinds of wrong assumptions you have made and where your methods are flawed. The next step, navigators listen to what others have to say. So when I would arrive on campus, I would listen to everybody else. Okay, what did you like about the previous band director? What did frustrate you about the previous band director? Okay, let's see what I can do with both parts of that information. But in the end, it's going to be me. In the end, it's going to be me. So no matter how much you learn from the past, it will never tell you all you need to know for the present. That is why top-notch navigators gather information from many sources. So for me, it would be the students, number one, then the band boosters, and then maybe teachers, administrators, coaches. Okay? Next part, navigators examine the conditions before making commitments. Dr. Maxwell likes action, and his personality prompts him to be spontaneous. On top of that, he has reliable intuition when it comes to leadership, but he is also conscious of his responsibilities as a leader. Good navigators count the cost. Good navigators count the cost before making commitments for themselves and others. The last part here is navigators make sure their conclusions represent both faith and fact. Be able to navigate for others requires a leader to possess a positive attitude. You've got to have faith that you can take your people all the way. If you can't confidently make the trip in your mind, you're not going to be able to take it in real life. On the other hand, you also have to be able to see the facts realistically. You cannot minimize obstacles or rationalize your challenges. If you don't go in with your eyes wide open, you are going to be blindsided. As Bill Easom observes, realistic leaders are objective enough to minimize illusions. They understand that self-deception can cost them their vision, end quote. Sometimes it's difficult balancing optimism and realism, intuition and planning, faith and fact. But that is what it takes to be an effective as a navigating leader. Okay, so we're winding down here. We're running out of time, but I want to give you this last little thing. This is a great acronym. Here we go. Plan ahead. P, you should write this down. This is really good. P, predetermine a course of action. L, lay out your goals. A, adjust your priorities. N, notify key personnel. Plan, P-L-A-N. Ahead. A, allow time for acceptance. That means I have to, when I got to the school, I had to give time for everyone to accept. This is the new reality. This is where we're going with Mr. Everts as your band director. I would think that would be any job too. Any successful leader is going to go in there, and you're going to have to allow time for acceptance. People are going to be shocked. Even people who didn't like the previous leader, all of a sudden that previous leader was great because he did things and blah, blah, blah. Head into action. That'd be the H. E, expect problems. Absolutely. The first couple of years are always miserable. I think some famous CEO said after 3 years, it's your problem. Following 3 years, it's your problem. And I think that is totally correct. It's very strong. A, always point to the successes. So we would do that. I mean, even if we got into the stadium, got into the stands, yay, we got into the stands, good job, band. Oh my gosh, we did a great job with the alma or the national anthem. Whew, okay, here we go. And then, yeah, any little thing that was how you as a leader visioned it to happen and they were doing it, you have to give them, you have to point to that success. And then finally, D, daily review your plan. Last little thing is I knew that major barriers, it's me, Mr. Dr. Maxwell. Dr. Maxwell knew that major barriers to successful planning are fear of change. It's a barrier, ignorance. Another barrier, uncertainty about the future. And barrier, the lack of imagination. Dr. Maxwell is going to do everything he could to prevent those factors from hindering him and his group. As I like to say, I want to make these 15 minutes long. If you want to get a hold of me, BAND, the number 2 together, band together at Comcast.net. Begin with the end in mind. Every choice you make is who you are, so choose wisely. Seek first to understand and be understood. And finally, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I care about you very much. I'd love to be your coach. I'd love to come and speak to your group, train you. Let's get better together because better people make better leaders. Thanks a lot. Bye.